Doping, match fixing and corruption. Can the world of sport recover from its year from hell? Also on today's program, are Turkey and Israel getting closer to restoring diplomatic ties? And in Picture This, Taiwan holds military drills as tensions with China bubble to the surface. Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garta. 2015 was not a good year for sport, and this year hasn't got off to a much better start. It started last summer when football's governing body FIFA was embroiled in a scandal of epic proportions. Then it was the turn of athletics, as bosses at the IAAF were accused of embedded corruption in November. Russia was accused of the state-sponsored doping of athletes, and the country remains banned from international competition. The new year brought new revelations. This time it was tennis under the spotlight as investigators served up allegations of match fixing. Today's newsmaker is sport, as we ask how many more blows the world can take before it can no longer recover.
The titles and trophies coveted by sports elite and the spectacles that are the obsession of billions are now on the defense, battling relentless match-fixing, corruption and doping scandals. As the bar continues to be lifted and the payoffs increase, sport could end up the biggest loser. As jaded fans continue to be let down and athletes are sidelined by uneven playing fields, each scandal is becoming less shocking. Without trust in sports, can people really keep their passion for the game?
2015 and now 2016 are the two worst years for sport in history in integrity terms. We've seen football, we've seen athletics, cycling the year before. So many sports have been exposed for their vulnerability to match fixing and in fact to internal corruption. I'm afraid this all has to come out.
Sports governing bodies are meant to police and protect, but critics say their weakness have created a corrupt culture, and allegations of foul play exist across the board. The former poster boy for Union Cycliste International, Lance Armstrong, after years of denial, the 7-time Tour de France winner was finally caught on doping. Not only did the UCI fail to stop the sport's endemic doping problem, its former head was found to have colluded with Armstrong to hide it. In November last year, Russia was banned from international athletics after a report accused it of state-sponsored doping. The report also found the association meant to catch out cheats was itself complicit.
The information the IC has very clearly indicates that the disruption of the federation emanated from the very top, the president, Lamine Diack.
The International Cricket Council has been dogged by its inability to end match fixing that's plagued the sport for more than a decade. One of the biggest scandals was unearthed back in 2000 when South African Hansie Cronje admitted he'd accepted money to throw matches. And just earlier this month, 2 South African players were suspended for allegedly fixing T20 matches. As the first Grand Slam of 2016 opened, tennis became the latest sport clouded by match-fixing allegations. A media report claimed the Association of Tennis Professionals is aware of 16 players who repeatedly throw matches, but has failed to take action. But perhaps the biggest scandal belongs to football. After 17 years as the head of FIFA, Sepp Blatter was banned from football for 8 years over an undisclosed $2 million payment to UEFA President Michel Platini. 14 FIFA officials and associates are also facing FBI charges for rampant, systematic and deep-rooted corruption. Sporting cheats not only deprive clean athletes of medals and spots on the podium, they hurt their reputations and futures. Each scandal is a fresh betrayal to fans who are invested emotionally and financially. Faced with these unprecedented scandals, all the major sporting federations have promised to clean up their act.
We can't beg them for trust, we have to earn it. And we should not be in denial about that.
We will look at this thoroughly. There was a zero tolerance for this in our game.
Sport only survives because crowds keep coming back, And if trust in sport is lost, the fans and the sponsorship revenue they bring is lost with it. Lance Santos, the Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now to discuss whether people are losing their trust in sport in Odense is Jens Andersen. He's International Director for Play the Game and the Danish Institute in the Danish Institute for Sports Studies. And here in the Newsmaker studio is TRT World Sports correspondent Lance Santos, who you heard there in that report. So Lance, doping, bribing, cheating, apart from all of that, sport's awesome at the moment. What's going on?
Well, there's a hell of a lot going wrong with sport at the moment, whether you look at individuals match fixing and people corrupting, big organizations corrupting, and big organizations not doing enough, not learning the lessons of the other sporting bodies. And to be honest, it's making sport a hell of a boring at the moment, because all we are doing, we should be here talking about Joanna Konta making it into the semi-finals, Britain having Andy Murray and Konta, but here we are again talking about corruption in sport. People are going to lose interest if we keep doing this.
I wonder, Jens Andersen, do you think people are going to lose interest? I mean, we're looking at what's coming up. There are the ongoing Grand Slams, and there'll be more later this year. There's Tour de France, Rio 2016, the Russia FIFA World Cup 2018. Are people really going to stop going to games because they believe it's rigged?
No, I think that there is still a huge element of fascination and attraction to elites, but there can be also an impact of the public lack of trust in sports event and sports organizations. What is happening right now is that a number of countries are declining from applying for the Olympic Games, for instance, because people, taxpayers who know that they will have to finance the party, are simply not trusting that it will be beneficial for their societies to host these 2 weeks events at the cost of billions of dollars.
Lance, let's look at tennis and compare it to some of these others. Is it different in the sense that tennis, like maybe cricket, has the example of one rotten apple or a few rotten apples, whereas the criticisms of the athletics bodies and football's governing body is that the system is dirty and that those administrators are dirty and devious. Is that the main difference?
Well, look, I agree that there can't be similarities in terms of cricket and tennis on the scale of FIFA. But look, we're only at the tip of the iceberg with tennis. This is how these scandals start, because, and I think in saying that we've got too much trust in the sport is probably wrong. I think we have too much leniency in sport, because if this was a business, for example, look at a major business, the leaders of the business would be sacked straight away. Sepp Blatter would go, Sebastian Coe would be long gone out the door, given what's happened on his playing field. And in terms of tennis, why are we only hearing about this right now? And why have people been allowed to get there? This will then come and uncover the greater scandal. But in terms of saying as a collective unit, yes, completely so. These are certain individuals within a sport that are cheating away to make more money. Whereas if you look at FIFA and you look at the doping allegations as a wider context, as Russia, as a state-funded doping, as they called it, that is much, much bigger than this. And that is huge bodies destroying the game rather than individuals looking to make a buck.
Jens, we have people following the money. They're looking for suspicious betting patterns. We have whistleblowers coming out of these various sports. I wonder, just long term, how difficult is it going to be to actually stamp out all this corruption? Because isn't it just an arms race, right? When we look at some of these sports, they're highly sophisticated. There's so many variables. In tennis, a bet could be on you serving a double fault in the third game of the third set. In cricket, it could be about how you shine the ball or bowling a no ball. So aren't those just maybe going to become more and more sophisticated, and authorities are always going to have to play catch up with the cheats?
I think you're right that this is a huge challenge and it's a long-term challenge. We won't have match-fixing, doping and corruption organizations eradicated tomorrow. I think one of the essential solutions must be to have more efficient and credible sports governing bodies, such as the international federations, the International Tennis Federation, FIFA, etc. What has happened over the last 40 years is that they have built up a billion-dollar global industry, but still using the framework that you would set up for local associations, meaning their internal structure is completely inefficient and there is no monitoring from the outside because they are associations, so they are supposed to act freely without government intervention and so on. And in this way, they have succeeded in creating a bubble that could play by its own rules, even if it was to be compared with any other multinational billion-dollar industry.
Lance, final thoughts from you. I mean, I have an uncle who thinks everything is fixed, right? When there were allegations about Bruce Grobbelaar, he said, "Oh, I watched the Liverpool versus Wimbledon game years ago, and he let one through his legs, and I knew it was fixed." And you know, he remembers Hansi Cronje, etc. People talk about 1919. The World Series was fixed. And this has been around since time immemorial, and we just have greater tools now. And because this is a greater marketplace, perhaps there's greater accessibility for investigators to be able to find more cheats because it's just bigger now.
Well, I think that is the interesting point, is how widespread does this cheating, match fixing, we look at match fixing, how widespread is it and how far does it go? In terms of this tennis one, I don't think it gets that far to the top because the money that we're talking about, 50,000, 60,000, is nothing for the likes of Andy Murray and Djokovic, who are making millions per tournament. But I think we are on the ropes, really, of sport. There is a huge worry. And if you look at, I know there will be people who come out and say that, oh, it's okay because we'll still watch, like you said earlier, Messi, Ronaldo and that. That's fine. But look at the likes of athletics. We've got a big Olympics coming up. Nobody watches it besides the Olympics anyway. Numbers are dwindling. Sponsors threatening to pull out. Adidas are pulling out. And that's when it comes in, when the money talks to this kind of events, where people, like your uncle, say it's fixed all the time. The sponsors stop pulling out. But at the end of the day, the thing is, we still watch sports, and I bet your uncle watch sport still. We still watch.
Sure,
the
he's just
games.
looking for the fix every time.
Yeah, we're looking for the fix, and there's sometimes that and bad goalkeeping.
Okay, Lance Santos and Jens Andersen, thank you very much for this discussion. Still to come on the Newsmakers, could Turkey-Israel relations be about to enter warmer waters? And in picture this, why Taiwan's new government is flexing its muscles in China's direction. Relations between Turkey and Israel have been on ice ever since Israeli commandos stormed a peace flotilla near the Gaza coast, killing Turkish activists. That was in 2010. And the two countries haven't had formal diplomatic ties since then. But despite recent provocative comments made by Israel's defense minister, there are signs that Turkey-Israel relations could be about to change. The Newsmakers Ashraf Helmi looks at how relations between the two may finally be thawing.
Israeli commandos storm a boat carrying pro-Palestinian activists. It was part of a flotilla in international waters organized by Turkish campaign groups. 10 Turks died.
The Gaza area, coastal region, and Gaza harbor are closed to all maritime traffic.
The incident happened more than 5 years ago and was condemned across the world. It caused a breakdown in diplomatic relations between Turkey and Israel. Back home and around the world, people protested on the streets. Now it looks as though there may be a sea change in relations. A month ago, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan told Turkish media, "Israel needs a country like Turkey in the region. We need to accept that we also need Israel, and that this was a reality of the region." Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he was hopeful and any deal would be good for both countries. Turkey says an improvement in relations would center around three things: a formal apology from Israel over the killings, which was already issued 3 years ago, compensation for the families, and also access to the Gaza Strip.
There is also the third condition of ending and relieving the Gaza blockade and allowing humanitarian aid to arrive in Gaza. We have not given up on these conditions.
This latest diplomatic push has accelerated following Turkey's downing of a Russian fighter jet over its airspace in November. It triggered a breakdown in trade relations with Moscow. An energy deal with Israel could provide Ankara with another source of natural gas. But the sticking point may turn out to be Gaza. In 2009 in Davos, Erdogan protested at Israel's use of force against Palestinians. He gained popularity in the Arab world for articulating the frustrations that many had with the blockade. But the political landscape has changed since then. Cairo, which has had frosty relations with Ankara since the ousting of former President Mohamed Morsi, is already nervous about a potential Turkish presence nearby. Israel counts Egypt as a key ally and will have to think hard before giving Turkey any access to Gaza. If Israel and Turkey can settle their differences, then it could be a victory not only for Ankara, but also for the Palestinians. In Gaza, they haven't forgotten what happened 5 years ago off their coast. An easing of the blockade would mean a brighter future for this troubled region. Ashraf Helmi, The Newsmakers.
Well, as we heard there in the report, Turkey and Israel could be on the verge of a diplomatic thaw more than 5 years after relations broke down after the Mavi Marmara raid, in which 10 people died. Well, joining me now from London is Sir Geoffrey Nice, a top human rights lawyer and former legal representative of the Mavi Marmara victims. Thank you very much for joining us, Sir Geoffrey. Would a greater thaw in relations between Turkey and Israel, as is happening, mean the plaintiffs might not get the justice they're demanding?
The legal actions being pursued on behalf of the passengers on board the vessels and on behalf of the states of Comoros, which has brought a criminal case or is trying to see that a criminal case is brought in the International Criminal Court, are both technically and realistically separate from political activity. The government of Turkey does not represent the nearly 700 passengers, of whom hundreds were abused, so they say, and of whom 10 were killed, one of whom was an American national. And they cannot, the government cannot on its own resolve the issues, financial and otherwise, between those individuals, that country, and Israel. Now, it is true that the state could assist in those processes, but it cannot deal with them on its own. And accordingly, the interests of all those individuals and of the states of Comoros, and the states of Comoros is important because the Mavi Marmara was under the flag of Comoros, all those individuals have different interests, but one of their primary interests is that the blockade on Gaza should end. Other interests are that there should be financial compensation. And those interests will be pursued by them and on their behalf, independently of what happens between governments.
Do you think they have a strong case at the ICC?
The position at the ICC is a very troublesome one. The ICC has been criticized, and not just in respect of this case, as being susceptible to political pressure. And it has often been said that it has been reluctant or incapable of dealing with Israel. It probably was not forecast by those who may have shielded Israel, in particular the United States, that a vessel like the Mavi Marmara sailing under the flag of a signed-up state, the states of Comoros, could expose Israel to investigation by the court. That has now happened, and the court is having to decide through its prosecutor whether it is going to take on the case and investigate it, as the victims and many others say it should, quite without prejudice to the outcome. That reality, which exposes Israel to some judicial oversight, has been strengthened by the referral to the court of the Palestinian Authority in respect of Operation Protective Edge, which happened in 2014. So that these actions should be pursued, and the International Criminal Court should say yes, or we argue on behalf of all those involved, should say yes, we will investigate, both sides of course, to find out whether this conflict has lawful justification on one side or other, or both. And that issue is not going to go away by some political deal between the governments. It can't go away. It has to be remembered that people's legal rights are both above and independent of government action.
In terms of the optics, it's the perfect opportunity, is it not, for the ICC to take it on and rebut those claims that the International Criminal Court is racist, it only goes after African or Balkan leaders. It's the perfect opportunity, is it not?
It is indeed a perfect opportunity. And without wishing to rub the ICC's nose in existing difficulties or rub its face in existing difficulties, it's worth observing that had the court showed enthusiasm for investigating the Mavi Marmara case within a year or a year and a bit of the first referral by Comoros of the case to the court, then Israel and Hamas would have known that there was a possibility of there being judicial oversight of what they did. And the question has to be asked, in the interests of everyone, whether that might not have deterred one side or other, or both, from what happened in Operation Protective Edge. Now, we know in Operation Protective Edge, 2,200 people were killed, less than 100 Israelis, the balance Palestinians, the majority of the Palestinian civilians, and 500 children. Might it have been the case if the ICC had led by enthusiasm to have this matter investigated in judicial, in legal terms? Might it have been a case that those 2,200 people would still be alive? It's an arguable point, and it shows the need for all countries, not just countries like, for example, England, which signs up to these things much more readily than some, for all countries to say, yes, there is an international legal order, and yes, we will comply with it. It need hardly be emphasized that the fact that America, Russia, China, and so on refusing to be part of the International Criminal Court helps no one. And it certainly doesn't help the interests of the rule of law in its international setting. So coming back to the starting point of your question, yes, this is an ideal moment for the ICC to take on this case and to show that it is not subject to the pressure of the kind that's been alleged against it. Let's put that in the past. But there's much more at stake than even just that, and for this incident. This could be, and should be, a way to get more countries and more of the powerful countries to accept the need for international judicial oversight, which, let's not forget this, is what the ordinary, what the non-specialist, non-political, non-radical citizen of the world wants. He and she want there to be regulation by law of the conduct of the countries in which they live.
Sir Geoffrey Nice, I hope we can get to do this again sometime soon. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. Taiwan has staged new military drills near the coast of mainland China. The exercises come as tensions grow with Beijing following the election of President Tsai Ing-wen in Taiwan. Let's take a look. Today's newsmaker has been the world of sport, which has been repeatedly battered by corruption and cheating scandals. It's affected sports all over the world, from those at the top of their game to those struggling to stay in the game. From Lance Armstrong's 2013 confession, when cycling's golden boy fell so dramatically from grace, to the fall of football's great survivor, Sepp Blatter, the people in charge of sport appear to be on the ropes. The question now is whether they can pick themselves back up and restore public confidence in the games they represent, and whether the fans will give them another chance. You've been watching this edition of The Newsmakers with me, Imran Gupta. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.